All right. Hi, everybody, and welcome to our webinar today, Restore, Evolve, and Transform the University Experience with ServiceNow. My name is Caitlin Frank. I'm with Crossfuze, and I'll just be moderating the session today, but leaving most of the content and good stuff to our experts that we have on the call today. Just a few housekeeping items. First of all, this session will be recorded and sent out to everybody after the fact, so check your emails. We promise to get it out to you within 24 hours, hopefully this afternoon. Second thing is there will be a Q&A at the end. So if at any time you have a question, submit it in the Q&A function of the webinar, and we will save all of those and get to them at the end. If you have any technical difficulties or need assistance of any kind, you can message me directly. I'll be online throughout the whole session, and I'll try to help you out as I can. So with that, without further ado, I will pass it off to Thomas Hunt.
Thank you, Caitlin. Thanks everyone for joining. I've got a couple of housekeeping items myself, but wanted to start off with some introductions. So my name is Thomas Hunt. I'm the practice director for customer workflows at Crossfuze. So I'm responsible for all things customer service management and ServiceNow. So when it comes to the success of our customers, our implementations, our sales and pre-sales, that's me. I've been at Crossfuze for close to 3 years now, but in the ServiceNow space for almost 10. With me, I've got Shannon Coburn. She's the Global Head of Education Industry Solutions. And Shannon, I'll let you introduce yourself.
Hi, everyone. Good morning. Coming to you from California this morning. So I started at ServiceNow about 1.5 years ago. I think I've had an opportunity to meet with some of you who are on this call this morning, and just really excited to be here.
Awesome. Thanks, Shannon. So the agenda for today, what we wanted to do is we wanted to talk about ServiceNow and how it really fits into the education ecosystem, specifically the higher education ecosystem. I'll start off and we'll kind of talk about some of the realities that we're seeing today, and then I'll hand it off to Shannon, and she's going to walk through some of the solutions that ServiceNow has to offer. Some of them you may already be familiar with, other ones may be completely new concepts, but I think the goal of today is for you guys to learn what kind of the art of the possible is with ServiceNow. Next, I'll walk through some use cases. So we'll showcase a customer that Crossfuze has worked with and kind of how they got to where they are today leveraging ServiceNow. And then obviously, as you kind of step away from this webinar, and you think about how one of these implementations might go at your university, we want to talk about building a business case and how you present that to leadership and some tips from Crossfuze. So with no further delay, we'll go ahead and step through the presentation. So some of the realities of today's institutions, right? And we wanted to talk about this before the actual solutions and kind of the products and services that ServiceNow has to offer. Because I think it's great to kind of acknowledge these, right? The first one is that cost is rising for institutions, right? And students are under pressure to kind of evaluate: do I go get a 4-year degree, or do I go directly to the workforce? So students, and for that matter, faculty and staff, right? They're relying, or they need systems in order to do their jobs, in order to go to school. And a lot of what they're using today is out of date. They're disconnected, and they're cumbersome. So, the more distractions that they have in the campus environment, right, it takes away valuable time from the institution's core educational mission, right, which is all the same, right? It's shaping the future of tomorrow's generations. The second one is that, campus leadership tends to believe that the core value of their university lies only in the quality of the educational experience. And, that may be true, but, campus marketing teams don't just sell students on the value of education itself. Granted, it's an extremely important one, but they're also selling students on the quality of the support services that they offer. So for example, right, if there's new, housing being built, they're communicating that. If there's renovations happening across the campus, they're pushing that as well. So if you're looking to kind of heighten how perceptions about the value of campus support services can be seen, marketing and the way that the products and services that you offer are key, right? And marketing can be your ally. Another big reality is that the data that you have to support the decisions that you're making is rare. And in some cases, right, we've talked to many clients and universities where it's non-existent. So, the service teams across a campus, financial aid, student services, IT, they do more than just provide those services. They have a pulse on all aspects of the campus. And they're looking to measure and quantify and analyze that to drive senior leadership decision at that particular university. And then lastly, right, a lot of institutions lack KPIs or performance metrics to reinforce campus-wide improvement. So a lot of what's happening today and what we see is that, universities are just trying to maintain the status quo rather than looking for ways to provide services more rapidly or efficiently or cost effectively for themselves. And there's really no better way to do that than by establishing, your performance metrics. So once you do that, you're able to hold yourself accountable. You have your bars of success. And, once you start to establish that, your service teams are going to be able to demonstrate to senior leadership that they're committed to, continuous improvement. And once you do that, you're showing that the value to your organization is not static, right? Rather, your value is constantly increasing. So, when leadership is looking at a campus, right, they're going to prioritize your group, and it makes investments in a platform like ServiceNow more feasible. So kind of wanted to touch and acknowledge some of those realities before we walk through the solutions. And with that, I will let Shannon take over and we'll talk through some of these solutions.
Sure. So again, good morning. I have the fortunate opportunity to work in a global position here at ServiceNow. And so that means that I get to work with institutions really from K-12 through higher education all over the world. So what's interesting, and I often say this, is as different as every institution is in their own way, there are so many similarities. And so what we're trying to do, especially coming out of this, unprecedented 18 months, 20 months, however long it's been now through the pandemic, where we've seen so much change and so much innovation, is to really identify those key transitions, those key areas on any institution where we might be able to eliminate some of that friction that we've often seen, some of which Thomas was just talking about, help things sort of move along more easily, but primarily align to the strategic initiatives of the institution. And so you'll see here on this slide, and I'm sure many of these are familiar to you. I think at the top of a lot of higher ed institutions, strategic initiatives comes down to student experience. We've heard a lot about that in the past, again, 18, 20 months. This was a key initiative even before the pandemic, but I think it's ramped up even more. In addition to the role I have at ServiceNow, I'm also a mom of two, one who just started as a freshman in college this year, and one who's in the process of painstakingly completing her applications right now, which is like just the bane of my existence right now, getting her through this. But it's been so interesting in my role to watch them go through this process from a firsthand experience, because, admittedly, it's been some time since I've had to do this. But, when I think about student experience, I also think about the family experience that's going through this. We've heard a lot about faculty and staff workflows, and a lot of you on here are in the mud of that every single day. All of those different systems that each and every one of them by themselves is really great. But when you're trying to assemble that like a puzzle to understand how to make that data actionable, sometimes that can be challenging and just time consuming. We think about those IT processes and business operations, workflows, all of that stuff that's under the hood that, to Thomas's point, it's not just about sort of delivering content. This idea of school is much bigger than this. And we've known this forever, but I think once the idea of going and attending school, classes each day was sort of taken away from us, it was a reminder that education is much more than just, someone talking at you in a lecture. And I've seen this again in my own house as I've tried to launch my son, that so much of that is about just the next phase of his life and what kind of support is he going to get. So we want to make sure that all of those operational workflows are supporting that experience for him and for all the people on campus. And we certainly think about, wanting to make all of this safe. There's so much personal, financial information. You have so many users of that information on campus. And once everybody kind of went to their, separate places and started working remotely, the risk of that data certainly increased. And so we want to make sure that underlying all of that is that the information is safe. Thomas, if you move, or I'm not sure who's got the deck, move to the next slide, please. So I covered a lot of this, but again, we're thinking about this from a student perspective, that frictionless engagement. Part of that means that they need to be able to self-serve. There's the days of, having to stand in line when whatever office you need to talk to somebody in is open from 9 to 5 or whenever those hours are. We know, my son is telling me now, he's basically going to sleep at 4 and 5 o'clock every morning. And he's like, but it's fine because I don't have, I have a class in the afternoon, so I just sleep in, but that's his productive time. That's when he's going to need support. And so he needs to be able to not hit a roadblock to get that information. We also want to make sure that that there's one place for him to go. We know that that's the easiest thing. So he's been texting me recently, I'm thinking about taking a class in the summer because I can do it remotely. Which ones could I take? And I'm thinking, you need to talk to somebody there, but he needs to know who to talk to before he can get that question answered. And that could be in a number of many offices. Ideally, what he wants, is to sort of pick up his phone and be able to ask that question. And then behind the scenes, seamless to him, it goes to the right person and gives him the right information. And that might be a knowledge article that had already been written because we know that that's a common question. Or that could be actually, if it's a more complex question, he has routing that to the right person. In the same way that I order something on Amazon and it arrives in 2 days, and I don't spend a lot of time thinking about where they're sourcing it from or how they're packing it up, or is it going to be FedEx? Is it going to be UPS? How is it going to get to my door? I just know I push a button and I want it to show up. And we want that experience to be as seamless, as frictionless as we can for students. And then making sure that they have support along the way, depending on the complexity of their need. Next slide, please. We know that there is great value in this. And so I think a lot of times when we talk about student experience, we think about, this idea of, it's just kind of a nice to have, but it's so much more than that. It's actually, we're talking about business value. And so when you think about this idea of retention, we know it is much more expensive to find new students than to hang on to the ones that you have. And that's also your brand, that's your reputation. So we want to make sure that we're mindful of that. And it's just basic student service. Basic customer service is what I was going to say. So we also think about this from a graduation point of view. Students who fail to graduate, you've invested this time and these costs in those students, and it's very costly when they don't. And again, from a parent perspective or from a student perspective, when we're looking at many institutions and it's competitive out there, those are the sorts of numbers that I'm looking at from a mom. From a mom's perspective, I want to know, what's the percentage of students who are graduating? Is my kid going to graduate? Who's getting a job? What are the student surveys? Those are the sorts of things that I'm going to hang on to. And when we're comparing schools that we're going to look at. And so making sure that those experiences are great are only going to drive more success in that way. I mentioned that it's much less costly, to hang on to the students that you have. And then I really just think about this idea of engagement, because ultimately that's what we want. We want students to have this amazing student experience. And the more active they are and the more engaged they are, it feeds all of that. Those students create even better experiences for the other students. The challenge, I think, is having visibility into all of this and understanding from a broad perspective, how are all of our students doing, but also from an individual perspective, how is Jed Coburn doing? And where where are the risk factors for him to drop out, and what are those? And so how do you, again, use that data to constantly iterate and improve that experience so the next student that comes through won't have those areas of friction? All right, next slide, please. A lot of information in the press recently about faculty and staff. As much as I think about student experience, because I come from managing education, this is probably my starting point for a lot of these conversations, because I've always been a big believer that you support the people who are supporting the students. If we can take care of our people, those students are going to have a better experience. And so I think about this, and we'll talk about the value here on the next slide, but I think about this in terms of not just, a lot of times when we talk about employee experience, it's about kind of that onboarding experience and wanting to make sure that, that's very seamless for them. But in education, very often we're talking about long-term careers. You're talking about tenured professors. You're talking about, even though people may not be at one institution their whole life, they tend to stay in education and they move maybe from institution to institution. So those are a lot of transitions over a period of time. A lot can change in your life through that. You can, have children, you can, take a leave of absence, you may have to care for someone. So there's a lot of, that kind of HR stuff that we consider. But if you go to the next slide, I also want to make sure that we're considering it, again, from this value perspective in all of the ways, because for me, it's not just hiring and onboarding and how do we make sure that all of those workflows fit together to make your job better. Ultimately, it's about impact. I see that people who work in education, we always used to joke, like, nobody's getting super rich in education. You're there because of the impact. You're there because you want to feel part of, a mechanism that is ultimately, it doesn't seem like, pie in the sky to say it, but changing the world. We're preparing our future citizens. And so you want to feel like you're part of that. And it's much more difficult to do that when all of those experiences are siloed, that data is siloed, and it's very difficult to understand, again, how to know where that student is going to be dropping off, or how to know what you're doing right, what's happening right in an institution that we want to replicate over and over again. And I think the beauty of having really defined workflows means that if we have a workflow here that makes it very easy for a student to, from their phone, make an appointment with an advisor, that same workflow works if they need a personal counselor. That same workflow works if they need to find a volunteer opportunity. That same workflow, you can replicate that in different ways, and it's familiar to the student and it's familiar to those who are managing that workflow. Next slide, please. So yeah, the next two are really just about sort of automating and optimizing those processes. And again, we think about this from an IT perspective because we know that institutions, this idea of IT has changed so much in the past 20 years. I think, IT, when I went to university, which was, a million years ago, I'm not sure what that was because we didn't have the internet. Was it like, I think that was like, do the phone systems work? Or we had computers, but it's changed now. And so we know that it's such a crucial and strategic part of any institution to ensure, again, that all of these systems can work together, that they are simplified. We think about things like adoption. I have seen great challenges sometimes with very innovative, IT professionals, whether that's a CTO or a CIO who has great ideas about how to modernize IT on campus. And then you have staff, again, that's been there, they're steeped in tradition, and they're thinking, yeah, it's always worked. This is the way we've always done it. And now you want me to do this different thing. And so we want to make sure that we are really talking through, again, the value of that. How is this going to make everybody's life easier? How are we going to have safe access to data that's actually going to move the needle on the strategic initiatives for the institution? So we want to make sure that that's simplified. We want to make sure that those issues are resolved quickly, so that all of the constituents, and that's from parents to alumni to students to the vendors, all have a quick resolution, and they're more likely to continue to adopt those technologies. And again, just better decision making. We want to make sure that we're not just throwing everything at a wall, which is expensive and time consuming and really ineffective. Let's actually use the data we have from all of the investments that we've made to ensure that we can drive success for everyone on campus. Next slide, please. I think this kind of iterates the exact same thing I was saying. Connecting business operations, these are some examples. One that we've talked about a lot are this idea of safe return to campus. Most institutions have already kind of thought through what that looks like for them, but it's a continuing changing process. And depending on where you live and what those mandates are, or what the recommendations are in terms of vaccines or in terms of masks, we want to make sure that we can meet our customers where they are and ensure that they have the right workflows to go through that process. Also, to make sure that they are resilient when that changes, because as much as we want all of this to go away and to get back to normal, whatever that is, we know that the next thing is around the corner. And that may not be, hopefully is not another, global event like this. But there's always going to be something. It could be a weather challenge. It could be, a PR issue on campus. We want to make sure that you have solid workflows in place, so when those changes happen, you can pivot very quickly. Again, breaking down the silos, we talk about that all the time. And then facility management. It's really an ecosystem on any campus. And again, whether that's, I see this from, big K-12 institutions, but certainly for a higher ed institution. Everything from the air conditioning in my dorm room is broke to, I need a projector in this room to, we need to come in and sanitize, post-pandemic. That's a big issue. So we want to make sure that that's really easy for institutions to, and for the individuals in the institutions to just make those requests and be able to track those needs constantly. That might be, I think that's the end of it. So that's sort of my big picture. Again, from a global perspective, these are the most common areas that we're talking to customers about now and seeing, both from, like I said, from a personal perspective, going through this process now, and then also just that we're hearing from our customers. I'll pass it back over to you, Thomas.
Yeah, thanks, Shannon. That was a great overview. So, really what Shannon was getting at is each one of those solutions, right? And employee experience and student experience. They all relate to a certain part of the platform within ServiceNow. And what we want to do is we kind of wanted to walk through, a Crossfuze customer that we believe is leveraging the platform to its full potential, right? So kind of walking through a use case here. So Crossfuze worked with a large federally chartered research university, right? And they came to us, when they were first starting to realize that the current system that they had in place wasn't going to be able to scale, right? Enrollment was increasing. Other parts of the campus outside of IT were really, the processes were manually driven. So, the challenge that they had was they wanted to eliminate those manual processes while connecting the campus, right? And when we think about the campus, right, there's a lot of challenges in the types of customers that you support, right? In many organizations, it's just a consumer, right? But universities have lots of different levels of consumers, right? There's parents, there's students, there's faculty, there's prospective students, there's alumni. So obviously deploying a lot of point solutions for those different types of customers or people that you interact with is costly. And obviously it doesn't allow you to connect your business operations. So what this campus was able to do was they were able to deploy ServiceNow and eliminate, number one, their current legacy solutions, but also start to connect those departments, right? So they were able to connect their student services teams, their student financial aid teams, in addition to others. Another interesting piece, and Shannon kind of touched on this while she was talking, was there's a large maintenance and facilities part of campuses that I think is really overlooked, right? And I love the analogy that Shannon used. I like to refer to campuses as kind of a small city, right? You're providing transportation and safety from a public safety perspective, and healthcare and food, and field service. Certainly if there's different campuses, but a single campus can obviously be massive. There's a ton that's required to just literally keep the lights on. And what this customer was able to do is they were able to automate 300 weekly maintenance tasks that they had. So maybe that was make sure that the fire extinguisher has been inspected, for example, on this floor in this specific building, and then redo that 50 times for 50 different buildings. And they had 70 users that were out there fulfilling that every day. And another really cool piece of what they were able to do is, the technicians that are constantly moving around, these aren't people that are sitting behind a desk, right? So how are we able to connect them to the platform that everyone else on campus is using? And we do that through a mobile interface, right? We're able to have kind of a mobile first campus experience. And then lastly, they were able to kind of consolidate that self-service interface that Shannon had talked about. So, it's never, a student, if a student shouldn't have to go to one place, a parent shouldn't have to go to another place, alumni shouldn't have to go to another place. They kind of consolidated all the interactions that they were able to have with the different types of people that they were supporting, to really give a great experience regardless of who that specific user was. And they're leveraging almost the entire platform, or will be close to the end of the year. So this is a really great example of a customer who's able to take ServiceNow, see the value that it's going to provide, and then make it come to fruition. What we want to do next is kind of walk you through their journey. So what did that look like, right? Obviously, different universities and institutions are kind of in different levels of maturity, and kind of where did they start? How did they end up where they're at today? I think that's a question that we get asked a lot, because having references in the higher ed space is it's extremely comforting, right? I think a lot of you guys have the same challenges. So it's beneficial to kind of walk through, a ServiceNow journey with someone who's been really successful at it. We started talking to this client in 2018, and again, the initial concern was to displace their current ticketing system. And now this was primarily from an IT perspective, which is where a lot of these conversations start. Although granted, they could absolutely start anywhere, right? They could start from a student perspective. They could start from an employee and faculty perspective. So while enrollment was growing, they were unable to provide support to faculty and students at a rate that they were satisfied with. And the outcome of that, or what we did to achieve success there, was Crossfuze has what we call Smart Launch for IT Service Management offering, which is kind of a quick time to value offering to get your campus up and running in as little as 6 weeks. So we were able to quickly deploy that. And what that organization was able to do was they were able to go back to their leadership and their other teams and say, hey, I've got a quick win here, right? We completely displaced that system. We're now using ServiceNow. It's so much better than our previous system. And that shows a lot of value, right? It shows that their investment played off. Now, moving into the next year, right, going through in a change like that and displacing a system that may have been around for 3, 5, 10 years, that's a lot of change for the people that are using it, right? It's a lot of change for the students as well. So we worked with this client and kind of entered a stabilization period, right? So they needed, everyone that was using that tool, specifically IT service management within ServiceNow, to adapt to the new processes and technology changes. Right, resetting a password wasn't the same as it was in its previous system. It was enhanced, although it wasn't the same. And they also needed to implement their own organizational change to make the rest of the campus understand that we are trying to digitally transform what we're doing here. But this allowed everyone to quickly get up to speed on ServiceNow. They were able to increase the efficiency of their support staff, which in turn, they had a ton of productivity gains. And then moving into 2020, the conversation started with how do we move beyond IT, right? And this kind of goes back to that customer conversation, right? There's so many different people that we're supporting, other than currently enrolled students who lost Wi-Fi in their dorm, for example. So the challenges is that student and parent-facing financial teams and student services teams, they struggled to find visibility in open cases, right? They were using emails or spreadsheets. There was no connectivity between, say, student services and financial aid, certainly when a student is being onboarded, and just a ton of manual correspondence with who they were interacting with. So it took a lot of work to, have something come into a shared inbox. Sometimes it might have been lost on a busy day, certainly towards, enrollment or maybe end of the year, or maybe that's graduation, and it would just get lost and people would be frustrated. So the conversation moved beyond IT, and as ServiceNow started to spread within the organization, right, other pieces of the campus wanted in on ServiceNow, right? They realized that, ServiceNow isn't just an IT ticketing tool. This is a tool that can, transform our business, whether that's, with alumni or parents or any service that we're providing. So they were able to deploy customer service management, and following that, they had a single pane of glass for all of their users, and for students to come in and submit cases, ask a question, review an FAQ document on, how do I apply for a loan, or what is the status of my loan application? Those types of things they're able to achieve. They were able to do that quickly. And then as part of those conversations is when we started discussing field services and how that would kind of come into the picture as well. So as the rest of the campus was starting to automate what they were doing, this customer started to look at, where we are most manual, and certainly in the midst of a pandemic, this became increasingly important. So the challenge that they had is they had a tool that was going to sunset in just a couple of months, right? So that existing tool was going to go away. And frankly, a lot of what this customer was doing, could be as manual as pen and paper. And they wanted to bring them into ServiceNow and give them that mobile interface, right, that we had talked about, and allow them to be on the go and quickly resolve issues, whether that's an issue in a dorm building or in a lecture room. There's a lot of urgency surrounding those types of requests. And if you're not deploying these things in an efficient way, customers are going to be left dissatisfied or unsatisfied with the service that they received. And there could be, callbacks and those types of things. So they were able to eliminate all of their paper-based work orders. I mentioned in the previous slide, right, they were able to automate over 300 weekly tasks. And then they were able to deploy ServiceNow mobile application to support those 70 technicians that were constantly on the go. And granted, this is all connected with the rest of their platform. So for example, they could easily send a field service technician out to a case that was originally created for IT. IT can just flip that over the fence to field services, and now they can go and do their work. And then moving into 2021 is when the maturity of this customer really started to take off, right? And really the final piece of the puzzle was to focus on, that employee experience and from a fiscal and financial perspective as well. So, they had no way to unify their human capital management, their finance and their student systems into a single system of action. They knew that ServiceNow had the capacity to do that. So now with their current deployment, right, we're able to integrate their HCM, their financial systems, and their other student systems using ServiceNow to support those HR and finance teams. So campus HR, campus finance, student services, financial aid, IT, all of these systems, or all of these groups rather on campus are using ServiceNow as kind of the glue that holds them all together. And that's made them an efficient organization and saved them a ton of money. Because if you think about all of these use cases that we just talked about, there's several applications, standalone applications out there in the market that address each one of these. ServiceNow has them all into a single platform. So there's a lot of benefit that this customer was able to gain. And again, I think there's a lot of value in discussing with everyone on this webinar how other campuses are doing this. And your journey may be different, right? Your focus may be on the student experience first, or field services, or the faculty and employee experience first. But I do think this is a great example of how one customer was able to take one idea and turn that into an opportunity or a solution to completely transform their entire campus. Next, we want to talk about how do you build your business case, right? Shannon reviewed, obviously all the solutions that ServiceNow has to offer. I kind of walked through some of the use cases where we've seen other customers be successful. So as you kind of walk away from this webinar and you think, how do I even bring this up to leadership? Obviously, completely transforming your campus is no small investment, and it's no small task either. So how do you actually build a business case around that? One of the things that we like to point out is there's three primary things that you always need when you're building a business case, right? Is why. Why is this initiative particularly important? Everyone on a field level that are interacting with students on a daily basis, there's probably tons of things they have in the back of their mind where we need to improve that. And almost always that improvement could be linked to a strategic initiative that the campus already has in place. And when you're able to, know the why do you need this? And you're able to align that to an already solidified campus initiative, you've got a really good start to a really strong business case. And then you have to ask the question, what, right? What are the challenges and what are the recommendations that you have, right? You can't just bring that challenge up and say, we have a problem with, transcript requests. Right? There's a lot of steps involved in that process. For example, everyone knows what the challenges are. What people in leadership want to know is how do you plan to solve that particular challenge? And then lastly, they want to know how are we going to measure it? If they decide to make this investment, what sort of ROI are they going to be able to see on that? So, creating these, seamless campus experiences shouldn't happen in a vacuum. All the bells and whistles that an institution implements should be linked back to the organization's strategic institutional goals. So in other words, every element of the solution should somehow advance the goal the institution is working to become. So if a strategic goal, I'll lay out an example here, is to say strengthen its connections to alumni, then that goal should be tied to customer service management's potential to create an online alumni network, right? And enable alumni to easily donate or to stay informed about campus events, for example. So when you're able to kind of articulate the relationship between, say, a solution, right, like HR service delivery or customer service management, and the priorities and goals that the university has, frankly, probably already laid out for itself, you're starting to build a business case. And your business case, not coincidentally, resonates with institutional leadership, which is always constantly evaluating everything through the lens of how they can advance that institution's mission and goals. So if you kind of look at the three-step process, right, the first thing you want to do is you want to start to identify those key issues and improvement areas. Frankly, this is the easiest part, right? Everyone will raise their hand when I say, what's the biggest problem that you deal with today? Everyone knows what they are. The hardest part, I think, is developing recommendations. I think that's where people struggle. Everyone wants to talk about the problems. No one ever wants to talk about the solutions. But that's how you really start to improve that. And once you have developed your recommendations, then you begin constructing your business case. Then you go and socialize that across the campus and communicate that with your direct leaders, and then finalize that business case. And then you deploy it, right? And then after you deploy it, then that's when you do the how. Right? That's where you're going to monitor and manage the value that you received on that particular investment. And one of the things that we kind of wanted to walk through today was a strategy map, right? What does this look like? It's just another example. Obviously, your strategic drivers at your institution may be different, but wanted to lay out a couple here, and maybe this will, kind of get some wheels turning in regards to, what is the best way to present this business case to my leadership. So if you look at a strategic driver, obviously, I think for a lot of institutions, enrollment growth is a strategic driver, right? We want new students coming in the door every year. What are the issues, right? We're defining the why, right, or the problem. And it's that enrollment is, it's decreasing. And, as much as we probably don't want to admit it, the campus environment or choosing a school to go to is absolutely a competitive environment. So drawing new students and keeping existing ones is the problem, right? How do we address that? Well, what we do is we create a modern and integrated experience, right? That's the outcome that we're shooting for. We create a mobile first campus, right? We think about how these students interact with everything outside of their school, right? I think about, if I want to order something off of Amazon, or if I have an issue with my credit card, there's a mobile experience for that. How come that experience ends once I step on campus, right? And as you're looking towards the outcome, that's the resolution. And then the value that the university sees out of that is, you have some sort of percentage of reduction in, say, recruitment costs, because students are now staying on campus, right? It's not more attractive to leave, it's more attractive to go. So that's some value. Another example is, digital engagement in data, right? That may be another strategic driver. I mentioned earlier in the webinar, a lot of times I think what the strategy of campuses are is just to meet the status quo. What's required from a regulatory perspective. And what you're missing out on is the ability to impact strategic initiatives because you don't have data to support it. So that's the issue, right? Maybe all of your analytics is siloed to a particular department, right? Admissions knows what they're responsible for, financial aid knows what they're responsible for, but it's just to meet the status quo. So the outcome of that, right? The recommendation might be to, maybe we want to survey our students, maybe we want to survey our faculty and staff through ServiceNow or our alumni. Maybe we want to deploy a virtual agent to expedite service delivery if someone has a question or wants to review a knowledge article. And then the value at the other end of that is, some sort of reduction in call volume due to self-service, right? And that could be turned into dollars, right? I mean, if people are spending less time on the phone or sifting through emails, they're being more productive. And the more productive your employees are, the more money that's saving the university, or the more value they're getting out of that single employee. Or it could be an X% increase in student satisfaction, right? Which again could be turned back to enrollment growth or keeping kids on campus. So when you're kind of building out your business case, right, we like to think of, something like the strategy map that can assist in that conversation. But primarily kind of going back here, right, you want to focus on the why. You want to describe to, that executive leadership team what the challenges are, but more specifically, what are the recommendations that you have in order to fix it? And then obviously present, how you're going to measure success. So following that, we wanted to let you guys in on something new that Crossfuze has recently developed. Is we've recently written a customer service management success for higher education institutions ebook. So this was specifically written for campuses and universities, and it's going to kind of guide you through, what are the thought processes or priorities that you guys should prepare to implement. And we also identify 7 elements that we feel are crucial for leaders in the higher ed space to understand. And then obviously, once you get to an implementation phase, how do you stay laser focused on implementing everything that you've set out to do, right? Going through an implementation or displacing a system, it's challenging, right? It's difficult. Specifically in the ebook, we talk about ServiceNow customer service management, which is the primary application that you're going to be able to use to support your students and faculty and alumni, and how to make optimal use of limited resources and bandwidth, right? Certainly post-pandemic, or maybe as things start to slow down going into the new year, this will be of great use to you. And I think as you start to build out your business case too, there's going to be a lot of insight that this ebook is going to be able to provide you. So everyone attending is going to be able to read that ebook, and we'll send it to you hopefully by the end of today. So to kind of recap what we discussed today, right? The first one is that there's some realities, right? And in order to move forward, we have to acknowledge that they exist and that they're likely here to stay. So the cost of doing nothing, right, is frankly high, and the cost of doing nothing is going to rise as well. Shannon reviewed some of the solutions that are going to drive campus-wide scalability and modernization. We took those solutions that Shannon had discussed, and we kind of showed you how a university leveraged them, right? How they leveraged it to drive innovation and the steps to get there. And then lastly, right, as you guys kind of set out on your ServiceNow journey, we reviewed a business case and how that should be structured, and how you should tell a story and have objectives and measurable results, and how having that and it being successful is going to gain buy-in from your executive leadership team. So with that, I believe we're at the Q&A portion of the webinar. Caitlin, I haven't been monitoring it, but do we have any questions out there?
Definitely, everyone, if you could submit any questions that you have into the Q&A widget on the bottom. I do have one that we can kick things off with, and that is a question around vaccine management and how that might fit into everything you were just discussing.
Yeah, vaccine management, I think is huge today. ServiceNow does have a vaccine management application, and I think legislation is always impacting this, and ServiceNow has frankly been ahead of that. But ServiceNow does have an application that's going to allow you to track the status of vaccinations. So say, for example, someone goes out, they get their vaccine, or a mandate has been put across the campus that all students must be vaccinated, or faculty, et cetera. You're going to be able to track that and track communication between that prospective student, or that student or employee. You're going to be able to know kind of which stage in getting the vaccine that they're at. So maybe they got the Moderna vaccine, they get it on this particular date. They can upload a screenshot or a picture of their vaccination card if they wanted to as well. And the campus is going to be able to view that. Again, it's all built on the same platform. So if there's specific workflows that tie into maybe other parts of the campus, you're going to be able to do that as well. But there's certainly applications within ServiceNow that are going to be able to support that. And it's a big piece, I think, that we're having a ton of conversations today around vaccine management and vaccine status, actually.
Yeah, I would add to that. Sorry, I think I'm having trouble turning on my camera, but still here and listening. I would add to that, we always, we talk internally at ServiceNow about drinking our own champagne, just really meaning that we use all of our own tools. And so last week I had a meeting in the office, and like I said, I started a year and a half ago, and this is probably true for a lot of institutions where they've started employees, or certainly students, are on campus that have never been there before, because they've enrolled or started in the middle of this. So it was the first time that I went on and went through the process, which is the same vaccine management process that our customers use, and uploaded my vaccine card. I had to that morning go through just a very brief questionnaire of whether or not I had any symptoms. And it was all very automated. They knew exactly where I was in the ServiceNow office, which building I was in. And then when I got back, gave a list of who I had meetings with that day in terms of contact tracing. So what we're finding with our customers is there's such a broad range of what that looks like. So at some places, in some schools, they're just they just want to know kind of what percentage of our population is vaccinated. Others are requiring, either testing or proof of vaccination. We have had some higher ed institutions that are actually delivering vaccines and are administering those on campus. So you're also talking about like supplies and, how are we going through this and tracking everything and having everything on site. So it really just depends on kind of where your institution is in terms of where you fall in that and what the needs are.
Yeah.
Great response, you guys. Paul has a question here in the chat. He wants to know if there are any thoughts on approaches with different silos of decision-making. For example, faculty heads balancing their agenda and core IT and services, that kind of thing.
Yeah,
I have some thoughts on that, but Thomas, why don't you take
that?
Sorry.
Yeah. So I know from an implementation perspective, actually the customer that we reviewed in the use case today, one of the things that they did to kind of address this, because I think it's a great question in the sense of, right, if you're making organizational impact with one solution, right, if there's different silos of decision making across different departments, it can be difficult to get everyone aligned, and people can kind of be going off on their own paths. The client that we actually reviewed today in our use case, what they did is they developed a steering committee, right? So they had representation from each part of campus that would be leveraging ServiceNow. So everyone kind of got a say at the table on, what would be the best path forward. So say, for example, they had representation from financial aid or student services and IT that all kind of fell up under the CIO. In their case, and that CIO was able to take the input from that steering committee that had been developed from the different departments and then make those decisions on what they were going to do with ServiceNow following their meetings or the agenda.
Yeah, I mean, my suggestion is start early to get the right people at the table. We are very encouraging of if there's an opportunity even to do like an executive briefing session or something like that, just to sort of understand, again, everybody's should be aligned under the same institutional strategic objectives. So if the school is trying to push towards a better student experience or a more engaged faculty experience, those are really broad. But oftentimes we're so excited to work with, really engaged CIOs because they are the ones who often can drive those outcomes for all of those little, the smaller and differentiated silos of departments that have their own needs. So let's think through what the outcomes are. And hopefully those are aligned again to the strategic objectives. So it's not a matter of where we want to get to, it's just what's the quickest way to get there? How do we use the investment to make sure that the most people are winning from that, but include them early and often. And then, with great partners like Crossfuze, we're happy to just set that stage a little bit. And then that may mean breaking off into smaller groups so more people can sort of see the value of it.
Great responses, you guys. I don't see any other questions coming in, but hopefully as you guys are digesting all of this content, if there's anything that comes up or that you're still wondering about, feel free to reach out to us. We're happy to respond on an individual basis as well. I think we can go ahead and close this out. Thank you so much for everybody who attended. Thank you, Shannon, and thank you, Thomas, for the amazing content. This was really, really thorough and I appreciate it. Like we said earlier, we'll be sending out this recording to everybody after the fact, along with the ebook that Thomas mentioned. So with that, we'll let you all get on with your day and hope to hear from you again soon.
Thank you for your time, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.